Minister, this bill, as the other deputies have said, is really a very small piece of legislation designed to amend the current regulations around the establishment of co-ops and to make the administrative process that bit easier. That's all it is. And to hear your response really was disappointing, I have to be honest, and I think we're in danger of talking ourselves into complexities that aren't there, because what we're asking for is not a reinvention of the wheel. The changes that are there and were recommended by the Society for Cooperative Studies and the Centre for Cooperative Studies at UCC. Both groups provided submissions to the Department's review in 2017, a review that hasn't been published yet, and I don't see why it cannot be accommodated. I mean, you know, you said, Minister, that reducing the criteria from 7 to 3, that there's no consensus around this. But in actual fact, the proposal is pretty much in line with what prevails with the rest of Europe. The other measures that we've looked for in terms of audit exemptions and so on are measures which are currently available to other types of companies, but not to cooperative societies. So we're not looking for anything special here. And, you know, when I heard you saying, don't worry about it, lads, we actually love co-ops here, and we're going to deal with it now in a big, huge, giant bill that's going to take everything into account and repeal this legislation. And it reminded me of the approach that we were told in relation to the updating of the coroner's legislation, which we were told was going to take place. We'd have the full comprehensive thing. Don't be amending it now just to be dealing with maternal deaths. We'll amend the whole thing. It had been at that stage been reviewed for about maybe 17, 18 years. The review was going on at that stage. The legislation is rooted in the 60s, still is actually, and after 3 years of messing around and leaving that there, you eventually decided to come with a standalone bill on the one aspect of it, which incidentally we still haven't passed yet, but that's another story. And the response is exactly identical. There's no conflict to you passing this bill now. If you have a bigger project, grand, off you go, happy days, work away on that. Meanwhile, we'll take this one and build on this one, because while you can say, well sure, look, we all love co-ops and we're here, we're trying to help them, the reality, as other deputies have said, is that we lag far behind other states. We're way behind the UK in terms of co-ops, not to mind lagging behind the rest of Europe. So there has to be a reason for that, and given our proud history, it's not our history or that we're ideologically opposed to it or anything. It's because the mechanism that's there to support co-ops is not as robust in Ireland as it is in those other jurisdictions. And I think it is important to say, as far as I'm concerned, the issue of co-ops is ideological. And I don't make any apology about that. The model is resilient, it's democratic, and it is based on values. Values that provide good jobs, good services beneficial to communities. They can obviously range in size from big companies to maybe a small creche or an initiative such as dealing with housing waste or energy or whatever. We've had them now with football teams and so on. But it is a fact that because of the ideology and the basis upon which they're established, they're much more likely to reinvest their profits into resources, training, education and so on, rather than dealing with sort of shareholder profits, and they're far less likely to contribute to environmental damage in their locality, much more locally based as well, which in this era of sustainability is particularly important. And I do think, and we do make no apology about placing this issue in the context of, I suppose, the economic turmoil that prevailed over the last decade or more, which revealed quite starkly for many the insecurity of the market, a situation which had devastating consequences for jobs, for vital services in our communities, particularly our rural communities, to be honest about it. And it's no coincidence that that same economic turmoil in areas of the UK and Europe which had co-ops, the impact was far less devastating for their crisis. The situation in Spain, 24% of Spanish companies were forced into closure, but only 6% of co-ops. So there's a value there out of that situation. We know in terms of research from Scotland that the cooperative model is actually much more likely to succeed in the first 5 years than other startups. And given the amount of money that we as taxpayers and citizens or whatever pay to start up businesses, many of which end up failing, the success rate is far better in these. So it makes sense all round that we would invest in these. And I think the bill that we're putting forward here today is really just to strengthen the legal framework in order to ensure that the cooperative sector is given the opportunity to fulfil its potential, because it is huge, and to ensure good governance and transparency, which is important as well, and our measures don't in any way conflict with that. As the deputies have said, there's a lot of examples in Ireland: the Dublin Food Co-op, the Key Co-op in Cork, Workers Co-op established in 1982. Great activists like Arthur Lee set that up, a progressive workplace and business with a restaurant, bakery, 3 food shops providing good food, sustainable products, recyclable packaging, green energy resources and so on. We know the model. It's been incredibly successful. It can be adapted into areas like waste collection and so on. We know that's a very good example. It's an activity where a co-op would be a very good model. In my own area, we've conducted detailed scrutiny and surveys in relation to that area after the privatisation of the bin service, operating in a completely unregulated environment with the consequential fly tipping and all the rest that goes through it, the nightmare that residents have in this area of emissions of different bin truck companies going down your road every single day of the week, depending on which company you're signed up to, and to run a pilot scheme where the residents themselves would provide that service as a co-op, operate their own bin trucks and so on, would be a particularly good model. So I think, look, we've seen in the past decade a lot of companies shutting down in Ireland. We know that a survey of Irish SMEs in 2016 showed that half had no succession plans at all. We know that in many instances then, in those cases, those companies kind of die with the owner. So the co-op model actually fits in very much in that, where worker buyouts can save the jobs that would otherwise be lost. And I think it's particularly pertinent against the rise of precarious employment, which presents significant insecurity for workers in so many aspects of their lives. And it is interesting that a report has emerged from the UK, from the trade union and cooperative sectors, calling for joint initiatives to sustain decent work for people and protect them from the poverty trap. The Union Co-op platform is very much trying to advance worker ownership and control in the service industry to avoid what's taken place because of the ideology of the market, because of the ideology of neoliberalism, the race to the bottom, insecure contracts, people not knowing what's what. And surveys have been done which show the impact on people's mental health even on working in an environment. Very good studies even from America. Many examples, simple bicycle shop where people work with maybe where they take ownership of it. They might be doing the same job they'd been doing before, but because they can set their own agenda and be responsible to themselves, it's an entirely different situation. So there's no reason why you can't accept this bill. I'm mindful that it is a bill dealing in some ways for me with workers' rights, and we have many groups of workers in this House who've been here very late last night and are here late tonight, and I don't want to prolong things because it's unfortunate that the House is sitting longer these nights, because it's not good for our own staff who are here either. So I think you can accept it and you should rethink and let it move on.
Thank you.